Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are in the world. Welcome to our Authors Circle live talk show. My name is Joe Groh, and I'm the host of Authors Circle. I'm also peer support coordinator at Voice of Men 360. Voice of Men 360 is a nonprofit organization founded in 2020 and is based in Toronto, Canada. Voice of Men 360 was born out of seeing a tremendous need and stepping up to provide service to help support and overcome men's, boys' life challenges. We're part of an International Men's Day. International Men's Day has been serving for over 21 years, and so far, 90 countries around the world joined together and doing various activities regularly. International Men's Day follows 6 pillars, which is overall well-being of men, boys, and men. We follow in the same footsteps. Why Author Circle? Well, Voice of Men 360 wants to recognize and appreciate the individuals who have been contributing in the areas of boys and men's issues through their writings. Participants around the world will be joining and sharing their contributions and experiences. This show runs on the third Saturday of every month from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Before I introduce our special guest today, I would like to go through a disclaimer. We'd like to remind you that Voice of Men 360 mission is always delivered with good faith toward peaceful harmony. The views and opinions expressed in today's episode are those of the speakers and do not represent Voice of Men 360. Our organization engages in discussion forums to offer inspiration and create awareness of the issues of men who wish to overcome their life challenges. We are not providing medical or therapeutic advice. Should you require that type of assistance, we recommend you contact a medical professional immediately. If you have questions or concerned about today's episode or any Voice of Men 360 content, please email us, info@voiceofmen360.org. Today's guest is Christy White. Christy White is a Bear Clan from Oneida Nation of the Thames. She is a mother of 4. Kristi has spent many years helping to establish and implement programs for families and children based on healthy living, healthy relationships, and literacy. She's a children's author and advocate for culturally and language appropriate content for Indigenous children, as well as theme of content relatable for boys. She and her family are very active in their communities and attend many events and ceremonies. She is also an author and publisher, The Adventures of Jay and Gizmo, where you can find a TikTok she was recently featured in. She was interviewed with award-winning author David Bouchard, as well as her nation's newsletter that just came out and has a feature on her books. She's a co-founder of Hopes for Hope. We proudly say she's part of the Voice of Men 360 board, and she's assisting as an outreach coordinator for Indigenous communities. We'd love to welcome Christie Waitra to our Author Circle today. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm really excited to be here. The first thing I'd like to say is, just so everybody knows, because it is a Saturday, if you hear a little guy in the background, he is up and playing. I just wanted to let everybody know that first. Thank you so much to Voice of Men 360, and thank you, Joe, so much for having me.
Well, I'm happy to see your face because we spoke the other day on the phone for over half an hour, so it gave me much better understanding of who you are, but not everybody else had that opportunity and privilege. So I'd love if you can share about yourself and the premises behind your book, The Adventures of Jay and Gizmo. It was really fascinating to hear your story when we spoke on the phone, but I'd love if you can share with our viewing audience and listening audience a little bit more about you and to fill them in like I learned the other day.
Absolutely. So I'm Christy White, and I'm from Oneida Nation of the Thames, which is an Indigenous community outside of London, Ontario. And right now I'm actually residing in London. I was born and raised on reserve and spoke our Indigenous language first, and then English and school and all that. Up through going through school and my own life, struggled a lot with school and literacy, but loved to read and write. It was a huge passion of mine. And then as I got older and had my own children, and I really started noticing, I noticed it with my brother, I noticed it with other boys around me, but I really started noticing it with my own boys, that it was really hard getting them to engage in literacy and reading. And, you know, it was always a constant struggle continually with them. And with that, I started really looking more into why that was happening. And out of that, there were so many things we learned about the education system. I started talking with more and more people, learning more of how the education system works, how we engage in boys in education. And I started realizing there was definitely some factors that were contributing to boys and having lower literacy, especially in schools, especially for cultured or Indigenous students.
Can you give us an example of some of the stories that you have in the Adventures of Jay and Gizmo? For what you told me, Jay is the name of a boy and Gizmo is the name of his cat.
Absolutely. So with the books, what we've done is we really, especially for boys' literacy. So some of the things we learned is that boys need center-focused characters. They need more engaging, positive male role modeling. Boys very much, especially younger boys, very much drive around ownership. So we took all of the information we were learning and bringing to the table as different parents, educators, that kind of thing. And what we came up with was the Adventures of Jay and Gizmo. And as you can see, Jay and Gizmo back there, we came up, so far we have actually 4 books in the series. And what we've done is we have Jay and Gizmo become best friends, which is the first book. And that's just establishing, and you see in the picture, that's establishing their relationship and how they met, and really focusing on their friendship. In the first book, Jay finds Gizmo out in the forest and has to do some problem solving and decision making around finding him and keeping him and those kinds of things. In our second book is The Adventures of Jay and Gizmo. I think you see. And in this one, they go and learn about hoop dancing, which is an Indigenous traditional dance to us that my son does. As you said in the opening, I'm co-founder of Hoops for Hope. My son is the founder of Hoops for Hope. And in this book, we share some information about him and about disability inclusion as well. And again, you can see Jay and Gizmo there. And the last one we have in our English set is Jay and Gizmo Learn About Boys with Braids. A lot of Indigenous boys, especially traditional boys, struggle with the fact around their hair and getting bullied in school. And it is a huge problem for Indigenous boys in school. So it was so important that we focused on this book. I had talked with Michael Linklater, who runs a huge organization called Boys with Braids. And that's just, it shows our Indigenous children their connection, and then for non-Indigenous children it shows them a little bit of a spotlight into our culture, because some of the things we found with boys is we need to give them more content that they can relate to. Nowadays, like, I find not every boy is into boys and what we would consider typical boy things like trains and baseball and that kind of thing. So one thing we really wanted to focus on is just giving young children, especially young boys, just a fun male-centered character that was just, exploring the world, learning new things, really showing positivity around that.
How did you come up with the names Jay and Gizmo? I was anxious to ask you that on the phone, but I forgot. So where did those names come up?
Actually, that's a great question. So we came up with the name Jay. I actually have a cousin Jay who reminds me a lot of the character. And Gizmo, actually, so when we had first produced the books, I had a co-writer and his name was James Brown. And that is James's cat, Gizmo. And me and Gizmo are really good friends. And that's one thing we do, is we try and keep the characters relatable. Most of us have a cousin Jay. It seems to be a very interesting, like a name that's very common amongst Indigenous children. So that's one thing. The other thing is too, is the characters in the book, like the hoop dancer. We have a powwow book coming out and it is going to feature a fancy feather dancer. And these are all characters that our own children can see out in community. Because that's the other thing, is we need children to not only just relate to certain things in a book, but be able to relate to themselves. So we really focus on showing Indigenous children, Indigenous world, because as we know, if we go into any cultured home, when you go in there, as you see on the back wall here, I have my Pendleton, it's got my horses on it. And most Indigenous homes, when you go into it, you know it's an Indigenous home just by, say, the artwork and the stuff around cultural items. Just like when you go into any other cultured home, a lot of times you can understand the culture that they're from by looking around their home. So that's one thing we've really done in the book, is just really made cultural things commonplace. Because for our children in their home, it's very commonplace. And when they go out into Western society, it's not. That's another reason why we have started translating the books into different languages. We just republished book 1 in an Ojibwe English version. And the reason we did that is, as we know, with children like French. I did not speak French as a child. It was not a language I was around. But as an adult, I actually know quite a few French words. And then when you think about that, well, how do I know that? It's because it's commonplace. You see them all over, like hello, bonjour. French has become such a commonplace that we pick it up just by seeing it everywhere. And in that theory, we know if we start making Indigenous languages commonplace, it's more likely that our children will pick it up, and it's more likely that other people will start understanding and picking up more of those original languages that were here in Canada.
So your books are primarily in English right now, or is there any process that would be placed in any other languages?
Right now, all the 3 books that are out right now are available in English. We just had book 1 released in an English Ojibwe version, and we're doing all the rest in an English Ojibwe version. And then we're moving on to another language set. Right now, the books are being used all across the world to teach children English as a second language. The books are being used in places like Bangladesh, the Philippines, especially in classroom with boys. They are really, really gravitating to Jay as a character. It's just been phenomenal to see teachers and boys just really, really working together. And as I said, around the world, it's just been an amazing experience for me.
So when you had this thought that you were going to write books, would you ever have thought in your wildest dreams that it would be expanding and so popular as it is worldwide?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
What was your intention then to start the book? What motivated you to do it?
Well, it's interesting because I've always believed in the whole theory that, if you can just help one person, that whole ripple effect and change, right? And as an Indigenous girl growing up in Western schools and struggling and learning what I learned and watching my brothers struggle in Western school, I really learned, like, along the way. I had, like, for example, I had one teacher that I will remember for the end of time, and that was Mrs. Rustle, and she was my resource teacher. And it's crazy because, it wasn't anything over the top that she did, but it was just in a moment that I was really, really needing somebody. She was there, and that changed my whole perspective on life and school and education. And I think if we can just even help one, especially young boy, with this struggle, to me, that would mean everything, because that boy is then going to take those skills and teach it to their son, and they're going to teach it to their son. And as we see, like, for Indigenous people, we always believe that we affect the next 7 generations. And that's how I feel we can make the changes. It is amazing that it's all over the place, and boys everywhere and girls are just so loving the books. But honestly, it was just about, if I could help make this struggle easier for one more child, I would be okay with that.
Well, I'm really impressed. I can feel the genuine sincerity within inside of you, the passion, the giving generosity that you want to contribute and make a difference in the world. I can't relate to not understanding reading and writing because I have a ferocious appetite for reading. I have lots of books. I'm constantly reading to learn and grow. Just Elon Musk said he feels that school's a waste of time, is he's learned everything he's learned from reading books.
Yeah,
But you gave me a different perspective when we spoke on the phone, that there's a difference in Indigenous schools versus the schools that I went to.
yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that and how you've chosen to fill in the gap where something was missing?
Absolutely. So when we look at education system as a whole, and we look back through the generations, and we were looking at, where some of these things could have come down through the system. One thing we're looking at is, as we're learning with mass graves just being recognized here in Canada, the residential school played a huge impact on especially Indigenous men and Indigenous boys, and especially when it came to schooling and literacy. And then when we look even further down, even into Western society, I started realizing that there's all these generations where especially boys did not go past in some areas, grade 5. Some seem to be grade 8 was the standard. And what that was is these boys were leaving school at that time to go work. So work the fields, work the trades, all of that. And for years and years, we heard generations say, well, yeah, Grandpa only, did school till this grade because he had to go work. And I realized that that was actually universal for a lot of that generation, not just Indigenous people. So then that got me thinking, when higher levels of education were established, then who was the student population they were looking at? The student population at the time would have had to have been girls, and not due to bias. It's just the fact that that's how the system was at the time. Girls stayed in school for longer periods, and boys went out, worked the trades and things like that. So when they were establishing the education system, unfortunately, it was very much catered to girls and learning. And that was only because all the research and everything was being done on the students that were in the seats in the classes. And at that time, it was very much girls. So a lot of our stuff in the school system, we don't see as very much to engage girls in all different types of learning and literacy and things like that, and not so much boys. A lot of stuff they implemented for boys were stuff like in gym classes. A lot of the gym classes, the games and stuff were driving more around what boys would want to do, what boys would want to play, instead of versus literacy, book reports, those kinds of things. And it's great, Joe, that you love to read. I have one child, a boy who is a bookworm, and then my other 3 boys, oh my goodness, heck no. So I'm wondering, Joe, when you were growing up, were your friends as avid readers as you were?
Well, that happened later in my life. So the show is about you rather than about my story. My story has a lot of interesting twists and turns, so I can identify with being bullied and constantly being in fights for other reasons.
Yeah.
But I overcame that. So that's why I really find it intriguing when I meet someone that chose to see what they can do to help other people with their struggles or overcome their traumas. And it sounds like you've been focused on motivating others to overcome the issues that they've had because you've been successful in overcoming yours. Am I right on that?
Absolutely, Joe. And that's the thing with boys. School, bullying, as we know, it's horrific. And I don't think a lot of people even realize how much that in itself affects their literacy. At one time, if you have boys that had higher reading levels, even in bullying instances, it wasn't so, I don't want to say it was so hard on them, because I think bullying is hard on everybody. But I think when they had higher literacy levels and they were able to read and have almost like an escapism or learn different skills out of reading, because there's lots of stuff you can learn. As you pointed out, Joe, now that you're older, you're really engaging in reading. That's how you've really taken your learning to the next level. And that's why I think it's so important to really, really focus on young boys' content and what we're giving them and making sure it's something that can engage them, make sure it's something positive, show boys center focus, making positive decision making. We really, really need to start really showing them that they have that space, especially in books, in literacy, and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Can you give me an example where a story in a book helped a boy that is much older now or even younger, where he wasn't able to read and you realized that it's necessary to understand how to read basic things, even more advanced things, and you've been the contributing factor to make an improvement in his life? Do you have an example of that?
Absolutely. As I was growing up, we went through some struggles in life, and as we got older, I noticed, especially my brothers and their trauma, I noticed with my father, I started noticing weird things about the boys around me. Because I am so literacy based, I started realizing that I'm sure a lot of you in your home, when you had school papers and stuff like that, that mom had to sign and things like that, you either took it to mom or dad. You knew what parent to take it to. And it was interesting because I really started looking back at things that were going on in my home. And one thing was, is I noticed that when I take a school form home, my dad would kind of look it over and, he kind of slide it over to my mom. And I was like, oh, maybe dad just doesn't do things like that. But then I started noticing, even with other paperwork, like he'd sign it, but then anything else that had to be filled in, he kind of gave to my mom to do. And then I started noticing more and more men around me, especially Indigenous community and that older generation. Really, I started noticing they were doing the same things. They were almost seeming to rely on their wives or daughters or that kind of thing to do paperwork. And that's when I really started noticing, and I started pushing and asking questions and that kind of thing. And I realized that there's a certain generation of men that almost had this pact of we're going to fake it till we make it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because they were trying to fake their way through literacy. They had very basic literacy skills because a lot of them, my father went into the trades. Again, he was an iron worker. So in the way of education, staying in higher education wouldn't have really made a difference when it came to his job. Literacy level, as he got older, I don't think a lot of the men realized how important that literacy level would be when they started getting into having to sign contracts. And you have to think, as generations changed, how systems changed. At one time, there wasn't these elaborate contracts that they would have had to read and sign, and safety standards and all of those kinds of things. That now these men were finding themselves in these positions where they couldn't. They kind of knew what the paper said, but they couldn't read it all together. Mm-hmm. So they were relying on other people. One thing I did know is I used to write storybooks for my father. And after he had passed away, I had learned that a lot of his buddies had to help him read them because he couldn't read them. And it was interesting because I grew up all my life thinking a lot of these men around me were completely literate, like they had great, and they always encouraged my reading and writing, like they all had great literacy skills. And now when I look back, I could not imagine, Joe, being a man in a world, and men, that whole stigma around having to be that proud man and having to be like, you've got this figured out, right? Especially for Indigenous men. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't imagine the struggle of standing there in certain situations and not being able to do a basic thing that the other people around them were able to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that they would be too embarrassed to admit that they don't know how to read or write. That must have been very challenging for them to admit those kind of things.
Well, and I think too, with the older generation, with that, I think a lot of them too, because of, that embarrassment and that kind of thing, they really took that front of, well, I have a grade 5 education, so I'm educated, so I'm okay. I do know literacy. Mm-hmm. And I think they didn't really see that turnover until the next generations, where education and literacy and those kind of things came more and more important. and more boys were staying in school. And now we have way more boys achieving higher education. And that's why I started with children's books, is we have to kind of go back to the beginning of giving children. And in that, when we get parents and children to engage in books, right, it helps both literacy levels. And what we've done is we've made sure, especially our pictures, what we love about it, and we tell our parents, especially if they are older, our ESL parents, things like that, that you don't always have to rely on the words. It's a beautiful picture, and you can use your own words to tell that story, because just seeing the words starts those little guys engaging and just processing those words and getting an interest in them. And that's where we have to start.
Well, that's fascinating. How do you help the boy that was bullied because of his braids? Can you elaborate a little bit on that story?
Absolutely.
I find some of the things quite fascinating, because they're things that are way above and beyond my experiences. So I'm finding it interesting hearing your perspective on things.
Absolutely. So there we go. This book here, Joe. Ian gets a letter about boys and braids.
Yes.
So a lot of our Indigenous boys have long hair. We don't cut our hair usually. If you're traditional, they don't cut their hair unless they're in mourning. And it's usually a mourning of a close person. So a mother, a father, a grandparent, a sister, a close cousin, because we do have cousins that are like our siblings. And that's the only time usually, like, you can get a trim, and that's around certain ceremonies, around moon phases and things like that. So a lot of our boys have long hair. Unfortunately, it's something that becomes very much a bullying part in Western school. Mm-hmm. I couldn't even tell you, Joe, the amount of little guys or parents I have reached out to me every single day around this topic. We have boys that are just, they struggle. So in this book, Jay ends up actually struggling with the decision around whether he wants to cut his hair or not, because he doesn't feel like he's like everybody else in his class. So one thing that happens in the book is Dad, in supporting Jay, decides that maybe they should go into the school together and have a talking circle with his class, and just open up that conversation and explain to the class why Jay has his hair and what the meaning behind it is, and to explain that our boys, their hair is the connection to Mother Earth, and that brings them their strength, the closer their connection to Mother Earth. Mm-hmm. So again, just showing that positive support, that decision making, again, going back and educating, and just really, really showing Indigenous boys to take pride in their hair and in their culture, and how it is a more effective way to go about maybe educating some of your class about your hair and that kind of thing. But then on the same hand, just really showing those boys that are being bullied that we've got them. Jay pops up everywhere showing his braids and supporting those boys and saying, you know what, it's okay, I'm just like you.
So that must have been a great step in teaching the other students about understanding a different culture, especially if it's not a school that is only for Indigenous, that is mixed, and that would help them understand rather than looking at someone different. And I'm sure it would help the boys that have the long braids improve and increase their self-esteem and confidence in being able to like and love themselves more.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons with that is, Joe, is when you're talking about educations, is when you're talking about Indigenous students. I'd like to get into that a little bit. One of the reasons we have this bullying issue around our children is because there is a good population of Indigenous communities across Canada that does not have schools. They have to be, like, for example, my own home community, we do have a school, but it only goes until grade, I think it's 6 or 8 now. And then you get bused into the city. There's lots of reserves where the kids automatically have to be bused into the city because there is no school there. And then there's other communities where it's almost like makeshift schools. Like it's not a real building with a school because there's communities with no adequate drinking water, and buildings and places like that still trying to teach education. That kind of goes into, as I said, when you have students, for example, who are on reserve for, even say the junior school ages, right? And then so with their own community amongst other boys who have long hair, that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden they're into a westernized school, a westernized system around westernized boys, who don't understand the teachings around the hair. And then that's where we get these really, really huge bullying issues.
So with the books, are you doing anything else to help young boys get a good role model or mentor to guide them along the way for what has been missing in their lives?
Absolutely. We have lots of guys who have partnered up with us, Indigenous men who are supports. We do put them in touch with these young boys who are struggling, especially if they are older men who have long hair, who have struggled with the same kind of thing. Just to help them really do that. We also, as a community, when we see that a young boy is being bullied, we really, really work hard to reach out to him, to give him that support and that love, and let him know that we're there, we're listening. And again, just really, really trying to be implementing that support piece for boys in school and literacy. And again, as I said, even non-Indigenous boys, every single one of them finds something to relate to with the Adventures of Jay and Gizmo, because a boy just being a boy is something any boy can relate to. And a positive boy just making good boy choices is something that I think every boy wants to relate to.
When you first told me how you came up with the name, I can't help but think about it. You said James Brown. Immediately, I thought of the singer James Brown. Too good, I know, like I should. I thought that's too funny, James Brown. Obviously, not the same James Brown.
Well, no, but he was he was musical too. We do have an actual song. There was a boy who had a cat, and Gizmo was his name. Oh, Gizmo. Yes. So that's the kind of thing we do to engage, especially young boys, right?
Yeah.
They love to sing and dance, especially when they're little. They like to be hands-on, so we do puppets and those kinds of things. Like we're back to paper bag puppets. Again, giving boys those hands-on tools of glue and scissors and crayons, just getting back to creativity with their hands.
Well, that's awesome. I didn't know about the song. I didn't know about the puppets. That's really amazing to make things fun. If you make it enjoyable, then they're going to want to be involved in reading the books and learning. Do you have a larger vision around these series, or where you'd like to go with this? What's the vision for the future?
Absolutely. So we run little projects through Jay Gizmo. We just did a 30-day little libraries challenge. We do a gift literacy thing that can always be found on the website at all times. I'd like to explain that. Part of that is I don't think a lot of people realize that Indigenous children, especially in certain parts of Canada, because they're either fly-in communities or they're communities that are located further outside of urban centers and things like that, don't have access to things like books. A lot of them can't get to a library. If they have a school library, it's very, very limited. They've probably read all the books in there. So one of the things we do is the literacy project, and that's where somebody can purchase the book and it's gifted to an Indigenous child on territory. And that's because one thing is, a lot of Indigenous students like myself, I didn't own my first brand new to me book until I was in high school.
So is there a method, if someone had a generous heart and wanted to donate towards assisting children that are not in the position to afford books, that they can donate and you can provide those books? Or nowadays there's a lot of homeschooling going on.
Yeah.
If people wanted to purchase some books for their own homeschooling for their children, how would they go about doing that? Is there a way to contact you to enable them to make that easier to participate in something that they can help others and move this process further and faster.
Absolutely. I just have a brand new website that I just built in the last, I think, month and a bit, and that's at www.jandgizmo.ca. And on there, you can find the Gift of Literacy project. You can see all of the books. That's where you can also contact me. We do discounts on bulk orders for schools. Also, if you are out in community and you run a small, whether it's a little library or something like that, you can reach out. We can send you books through those donations. We just gave, I think our final count was 375 books that just went out to little libraries all over different communities. That was amazing. At Christmas time, our Gift of Literacy project. Again, the biggest thing is especially with boys and literacy and Jay and Gizmo, not just being for Indigenous children, but all children around the world, is again really, really, really focusing on that boy character and really focusing on just a boy having fun. But again, those positive decision making, those kinds of things. It's interesting when we're talking about education and boys and literacy. So for an example, Joe, a lot of people, when you do shopping for birthday parties, let's say, and I had to actually check myself on this as a mom, because I didn't realize how much even myself blindly was playing into some of this. When I go birthday shopping, Christmas shopping, whatever, for my daughters, oh my goodness, I was in the book section. If we could find those little paper dolls or, princess books or things like that. But then when I go and get something like that for the boys, I find myself really struggling with something that I would find they could identify with or that they would engage in or enjoy. So I'd always find myself kind of throwing in the towel and ending up back over to the toy section, and they'd get a new basketball, a new baseball, a new glove. And I realized that as a parent, I was even contributing to just throwing in the towel of, okay, well, I can't find a book for you, so here's a ball. And I think a lot of us, when we're buying stuff for, birthday presents, not only for our own children, but other people's children, I think really, really, if we take a step back and look at all the presents we've bought over the years, we really, really do engage girls more in like books and literacy and that kind of thing than we do boys.
Yeah, that's a struggle for some people. Some people say, I don't like reading books. I'd rather do the audio or the Kindle. And not everybody has a big collection of books of things that they've thrived on improving or growing in their lives. And some people may have some trauma around their experience in the schools. And for someone like yourself that takes some small steps and now they become medium or large steps towards contributing to the world and providing books and helping people, especially with a problem of lacking the ability to read, you must have gone through your own journey. And we'd probably be here all day hearing it, but I'd love to hear a capsulized version of your journey where you've overcome to the position that you have the power and strength to be able to help other people overcome their trauma. Would you be able to share a little bit of that?
Absolutely. So I was a child who was born, as I said, I was born and raised to an Indigenous community, was very, very lived on reserve, spoke the language, very, very involved. It was my grandfather who, we were like Mutt and Jeff. Everyone say two peas in a pod. We were always together, all of that kind of thing. So again, and because he was very cultured and he was an Indigenous language teacher, was very, very, very much immersed in that. Unfortunately, when I was 12, he passed away. And in that, I had always struggled in school because I had dyslexia, other learning difficulties, English not being my first language. I always took ESL. Those kinds of struggles in the education system, I think it's a lot of Indigenous children, I hate to say it, have learning difficulties in the way of how the education system is set up. And I'm one that struggled in that. I was very much, if we could be outside learning, I took things in better than if we were in a classroom and it was very noisy and busy. But again, the community I grew up in, there wasn't a lot of traffic. There wasn't a lot of, sirens or noise and that kind of thing. So I think that's where I also started looking at in helping other children, especially in this whole transition between coming off reserves into urban schools, that kind of thing. I don't think a lot of educators, as much as they understand that's a transition, I don't think they understand it's a transition of things as much as the noise capacity. So again, using my experiences and my difficulties in that struggle, and then struggling with that with my own, especially sons, trying to help them with their schoolwork, their own literacy battles. I really, really learned that I could take some of my own experiences and the stuff I struggled with and really go and help other people understand what that struggle may look like and what these other children may be struggling with.
So you've had some positive feedback from people. We've had some, if your talk here is not falling on deaf ears, we have a couple questions.
Absolutely.
One of them is, have you heard any feedback from girls or female teachers? We're hoping, of course, for positive feedback.
Absolutely, guys. It's amazing. We have so many, especially female teachers. We do know the education system is a lot of female teachers. Great supporters of Jay and Gizmo. I have teachers constantly reaching out. I go in and do talks. We have, actually, it was just to let you know, female teachers that were reaching out from Bangladesh, Philippines. They're the ones. If you go on the Jay and Gizmo website or on the Facebook group, you can find pictures where you can see actually groups of boys surrounded by their teacher learning English as a second language, reading one of Jay and Gizmo books. And I really, really think a lot of the female educators are releasing. What I'm saying is they agree it is super difficult to engage boys in literacy. They're struggling in the classrooms just as much as we're struggling as parents out home. So yes, they are very much supported. They are very much seeing that Jay and Gizmo are making great stride. I have been to events where I've had a little boy come and I start reading him a book, and next thing you know, I've got 4 or 5 little boys sitting with me and we're doing a reading session. Just because, again, boys are so curious by just another boy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the whole thing with Jay and Gizmo, right? Is I have this standee here behind me and he stands almost as big as me because I'm little. But that's the first thing when I'm on at an event, say at a powwow or at a park market or things like that. That's the first thing they see is another boy. They want to come and figure out, hey, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that leads into another question. I think you're touching on it. You've now expanded in the books in the Philippines and India, and I find that fascinating. So they must be already being translated in those languages, or are they only in English?
No, actually, we have teachers all over the place who've reached out. I have given them my okay personally to use them in their classrooms to translate into their own languages. We have so many different languages that are using them in different classrooms. As you said, we have a lot of homeschools now that have popped up, which is just incredible, right? So we have a lot of parents who are speaking different languages, grew up in different languages. So yes, they're buying book in English. They'll translate it into their own to use it at home. And I just think it's great because, again, all it is just being able to engage children in literacy, especially boys. And the more boys are so curious. And that's the great thing is the more you can engage them, the more fun you can make it, the more they will engage. And it's just been incredible.
Wow. So what languages are they in right now besides English?
The ones that I do know of, published versions is only, as I said, the English and Ojibwe, but versions that I do know are out there being used in homes is the Mohawk, Cree for Indigenous languages, as well as Ojibwe, Italian, and I'm not sure. there's another Indigenous language over from New Zealand, and I can't pronounce it properly, so I would prefer not to try. But we have a teacher over there teaching it with that. It's just incredible. As I said, there's probably even more. So if anybody's watching and you are using Jane Gizmo in your home, and you are multilingual, please let me know what language that is, because I'm always so curious to know. One experience, Joe, I had is I have another friend who is an Indigenous children's author, and he was up in Moose Factory, and he was at the library there, and he had tagged me in a Facebook post because Jane Gizmo book was actually the book of the month up there that the kids had picked.
Wow.
And so here there was this big display of Jane Gizmo up in Moose Factory. And honestly, I don't even know how the book got to Moose Factory. And then, so when I looked into it, yeah, it was another educator who had sent it to a Moose Factory library.
Wow. I was wondering how moose were made. I didn't know there was a factory.
Exactly.
Where is the moose factory? I'd like to go for a tour.
Yeah. Not me. Those things, it is funny actually growing up in a Indigenous community. I spent a lot of time in a northern Indigenous community, and I think when I was younger I didn't realize how big moose were until I actually went to a northern community. They are not little, let me tell you.
Wow. So it must then be in besides English, must be in the Filipino language, Tagalog.
Yep.
It must be in Bangladesh or Indian language, and you said Italian. So
yep.
I'm assuming there are probably going to be plans down the road once people hear this interview today that there'll probably be in other languages. Who knows? Maybe Spanish, German. Who knows what other languages will be in? And another question: did you have any challenges with the schools accepting the books?
No, actually, they've been really, really receptive to the books. Again, we have a lot of things in the books that educators know just through different things we've learned now, how the books are definitely going to help children. One thing I wanted to point out, actually, if I can grab one of the books, in every single book, we have this in the beginning.
Wow. So you can personalize it.
So if way back in the day, Joe, every children's book used to have that. This book belongs to. And then somehow throughout time, we kind of let go of that, right? Mm-hmm. The thing is, we found, though, especially with little boys love ownership, and we hear it every day. We'll hear a little boy, this is my dad, my mom, my sister, my ball, my toy. So the best way we figured to re-engage them back into their own world of ownership is putting that in there. And we've got that in every book. And that's because now that little boy or little girl can say, hey, can you read me my book?
Is there
and again goes back to the literacy project of really, really, really supportive, supporting children in positive ownership around literacy.
Is there a favorite story in any of the books that you've got comments from, either the parents or the teacher or the boys?
It's actually interesting. It's pretty much even across the board because they talk about different topics. I think they've been useful in so many different areas. There's lots of children who just relate to book one, which is just Jane Gizmo becoming friends. I have a lot of cat followers, like littles who love cats. They love that book because there's a lot about Gizmo in that book. The second book about Indigenous hoop dancing and about disability inclusion and things like that, that has its own little piece. And then again about boys and braids and bullying. And then the new one that'll be coming out about powwow, again, that'll be its own center focus. The other thing I wanted to show you, Joe, in our books is another way we engage, especially boys in literacy. And I can't wait. I'm starting to get a new part of my site up so I can share this with everybody. And that's in our books, in the back of the book, we have this page, and there's a couple of them. And those pages, what they say is write your story here and draw your picture here. Because we actually ask the children who have our books to engage with us in the story. So it's amazing that I have children who send me back their little pictures that they've done or stories. I have a young girl who sends me stories about Gizmo and his friend who's a female cat. and about them just playing and all the things they do. It's just so incredible. I have another boy who sends me different drawings of Gizmo. I mean, he's been in a spacesuit. We've done some different adventures that way, and I think it's just so wonderful to see. So I'm really looking forward to putting up on part of my website of sharing what the kids are doing in their own write your story here and share your picture.
I really commend you for that, because I can see you put your heart and passion in, and it's your idea to initiate all this. It wasn't someone else that pushed you into this, from the impression I'm getting. So
No.
actually, it's amazing the time is going by fast. We have a limited time, but I have a couple questions that I'd like to ask, just curious myself.
Yeah.
Is there any version that's going to be foreseeable future about a boy with a dog, and even a girl's version books? Those are ideas I just thought of right offhand. Do you have any comments on that?
I do, actually. We are looking at starting a new series that is in the works, and it will have a dog. His name is Hall, and we're working on it now.
What's his name?
Hall, which is I can send you the spelling after. It's actually Oneida for dog.
Okay.
So, and we have different characters actually in our language than in English. So that's why I can't just.
Oh, okay.
But I will send it to everybody after it. If you check out my page, it'll be on there. But what we're doing with that one, Joe, is really interesting. We have a lot of children, Indigenous children in care. And we have a lot of children who are being raised under what we call kinship status, which is where they're being raised with family members. It may not even be first-gen family members, but it's still family lines. So what we're doing is we're actually opening a new series where Jay, the first book will open up with Jay getting a visit from a friend of his dropping off his nephew, Hull. And the reason that is we're going to, in that book, explore different family types. Mm-hmm. And we're actually going to put Jay into the caregiving role of the dog.
Wow, that's very interesting. And do you have a female version, a girl version of your book series coming out too, you think?
Yes, actually, we are working on a girl version. I have been asked to work on a girl version because, again, being an Indigenous female coming from Indigenous community, one thing I really try and spotlight along with the boys on the girl side is looking at the fact that I am an Indigenous female who has done this. So if you are a girl right now listening to me, sitting at home on the reserve and don't want to just do the jobs we all know that are available on the reserve, I'm sure nobody's told you can be an author. I promise. It's a lot of hard work, but I have your back. I never knew forever and a day that I could be an author. And it's so amazing now to see the young Indigenous girls who are like, I can be an author? Yes, you can. You can be anything you want.
Well, that's good to be encouraging like that. And that can give people hope and a vision for a bright future. I like the way you say that. You can be an author. You can be anything you want. I'm amazed. I'm really excited that we had you on today. You've got definitely an interesting life that you've experienced, and I can envision some amazing things happening in the future. So it's been a thrill speaking to you and getting to know you today. I wish we had the whole day we could speak to you, because I can see you've got a lot of amazing experience that you've happened, and how your heart focused on helping others. I admire, respect people that want to give and be contributing to the world. So I greatly appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences and all your community works, and keep it up.
Thank you so much. And again, if anybody would like to reach out or go check out the books, look at them a little closer, you can at our website. It's www.janegizmo.ca. Teachers, please reach out. Educators, please, let's have a conversation. Again, the books are available to be, and the other place you can find them is Good Minds. Good Minds is actually preferred vendor for a lot of education sectors. The books are available at Good Minds for the educators who are looking at them.
Well, awesome. Can they be obtained anywhere else, like Amazon or anywhere?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Well, thanks again for joining in. We look forward to again having you some other day in the future joining in, and you're part of the board, so you and I'll be conversing down the road. So thanks for coming today. It was a total thrill.
Thank you so much, Joe.
And I have a few announcements to share with everyone. We have weekly and monthly live shows through Facebook and YouTube. We have a live talk show on Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's called Open Up, where people will be opening up, talking about their personal life journey. We have a Tamil live talk show on Sundays at 8 a.m. as well, Eastern Standard Time. We have a monthly webinar the first Saturday of every month at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. We also have other shows happening all the time. We have a monthly special show, The Unspoken Tears, every second Saturday of every month from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. The focus is domestic violence against men, bullying, male sex abuse, traumas, porn addiction, human trafficking. Author Circle that I'm hosting, we bring individuals who have been contributing to the well-being of men and boys through writings, articles, media, and recognize them, appreciate them. The show runs on the third Saturday of every month from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Podcast, all of our shows are available on 6 platforms, including iPhone, Google Play, and so on. Monthly men's group meeting only for men by men every 2 weeks on Tuesdays from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. through Zoom. The next one will be on Tuesday, February 22nd. Please join through Zoom. The link is available on our Facebook page and group. Pass the Talking Stick. It's Indigenous peer-to-peer support group. Fourth Saturday of every month from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. through Zoom. And through Author Circle, there are no limitations with gender, age, and nationality or ethnic groups. All walks of life can participate in any of our shows. If you want to be guests in any of our shows or willing to be part of our organization, help us directly, indirectly, please reach out to us. We'd love to work with individuals, professionals, experts, community organizations, associations, corporations, government officials, and businesses. Our phone number is 437-889-8329. Email address is info@voiceofmen360.org. Website is www.voiceofmen360.org. You can find us on all of the social media. Facebook group page, join our group so you can see our daily activities. Please invite your friends as well. Other social media platforms are Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Voice of Men 360. We want to reach out and make a difference to people and help more. Please continue your support. Thank you for viewing today and attending. Feel free to contribute with any of your questions, comments, feedback. We love to continuously grow and improve. Hopefully everybody has a fantastic day. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you very much.